When my fiancé looked across the candlelit table at Verona's, our favorite little Italian spot tucked between two office towers in downtown Denver, and calmly declared, "I want a prenup. I'm not risking my future on you," I didn't flinch. He said it with the same tone people use when discussing refinancing options or gym memberships. No warmth, no hesitation, no thought to how it landed. Just a business transaction laid out like a spreadsheet. I set my wine glass down gently, even though inside something splintered. "A prenup," I repeated, my voice even. "Okay." Derek blinked. He was ready for tears, an argument, hurt, anything dramatic. But not agreement. "Wait, you're fine with it?" he asked. I smiled just enough to reassure him. "It makes sense. It's smart to protect what you've built." His shoulders sagged with visible relief. He reached for my hand. "God, Sloan, you're amazing. Most women would lose it. But you're logical, level-headed. I've worked too hard to put everything on the line, not even for someone I love." The phrasing stung. Someone I love, not someone I trust. I nodded slowly while my mind sped several steps ahead, already mapping out what this moment meant and what it would lead to. Because what Derek didn't know, what hardly anyone knew, was that the woman sitting across from him wasn't a mid-tier data systems consultant earning an unremarkable salary and driving an 8-year-old Subaru with a cracked bumper. He had just asked for a prenup from a woman worth $9.5 million. My name is Sloan Barrett, and this is the story of how the man I intended to marry turned his engagement into the worst financial miscalculation of his life. To understand why, you have to know who I truly am. Not the persona Derek thinks he's marrying. Not the simple, grounded woman his mother brags about at brunch. The real me. I'm 32, and for the last 6 years, I've lived a dual existence. In one version, the one I show the world, I'm ordinary. The woman with the scuffed laptop bag slung over her shoulder, the modest apartment in the Highlands neighborhood, the clearance rack sweaters, the same 3 pairs of jeans, the grocery list with coupons clipped to it. I'm approachable, predictable, easy to categorize. A woman who doesn't challenge anyone's ego or worldview. But in my other life, the one I built quietly, intentionally, I'm the developer of Syncsure Systems, a cloud-based inventory platform used by hotel chains and regional retailers across the US and Canada. Something I created in the spare bedroom of my old studio apartment. Syncsure now generates $51,000 a month. Royalties wired without fail like clockwork. I also own 7 rental properties across 4 states. I bought my first one in Nashville using the upfront licensing deal I landed at 26. Then a duplex outside Columbus, a triplex in Boise, a condo in Dallas, each one chosen with care, earning me $17,000 monthly in rental income. My investment portfolio sits at $3.1 million, a mix of index funds, blue-chip stocks, and a few high-risk picks that paid off early. There's also the commercial space I own in Salt Lake City, a strip mall leased to a nail salon, a tutoring center, and a sandwich shop. Altogether, my net worth, $9.5 million. And almost no one knows. I didn't build this hidden life because I wanted to deceive anyone. I built it because of the night that changed everything when I was 14 and overheard my parents fighting in the kitchen long after I was supposed to be asleep. My mom sobbing over bank statements. My dad insisting he needed to take risks. Money turning into a battlefield. Their marriage rotting from the inside out until it collapsed 2 years later. That night, clutching my stuffed fox at the top of the stairs, I made a vow. I would never be powerless in a relationship. I would never let money become a weapon. And I would never let someone love me for what I could give them rather than who I was. So when Syncsure took off, I kept my success quiet. I kept my life modest. I kept my finances separate. Then 3 years ago, I met Derek Langford. We sat at the same table at a mutual friend's wedding. Both of us single, both of us bored, both desperate for someone to talk to who wasn't vapid or drunk. Derek was charming in a very polished, intentional way. The kind of man who knew exactly how to land a joke without seeming rehearsed. The kind of man who could make client meetings sound like war stories. The kind of man who looked like success even if the numbers didn't fully support the image. He ran a boutique commercial real estate consultancy in Denver, Langford and Company. His business cards were thick and embossed. He drove a finely detailed BMW X4, leased of course. He lived in a striking apartment near Union Station with industrial beams and floor-to-ceiling windows. His firm wasn't thriving, but Derek performed success with absolute conviction. And for a long time I admired that. I saw parts of myself in him. The early struggle, the desire to prove something, the ambition. But the real reason I fell for him? He didn't ask. When I told him I did consulting work, he didn't pry. He never asked about my income, my savings, the car I drove, the apartment I lived in. He accepted the surface-level story without digging, without suspicion, without seeing dollar signs. For the first time in years, someone seemed to love me. We grew close. We built rituals, Thai takeout on Fridays, hikes at Red Rocks, watching trashy reality TV with expensive ice cream. I attended brunches with his mother Margaret, a woman with bold opinions about what young women today care about. "It's refreshing that Sloane isn't money hungry," she'd say, sipping her mimosa. "Grant, you chose well." I'd smile politely and swallow everything I knew she'd never understand. For 3 years, the balance worked. Until it didn't. About 6 months ago, I started noticing changes. Derek became obsessed with financial hypotheticals, divorce statistics, horror stories of men losing everything, cases where wives took advantage. Then came articles forwarded to me about prenups, about protecting assets, about being smart before marriage. One night he referenced a friend who'd been cleaned out by an ex-wife. "Won't happen to me," Derek had said casually, swirling his wine. "I won't make his mistake." I'd brushed it off at the time. But now, sitting at Verona's as he signaled the waiter for another bottle of wine, relieved that I'd agreed to his request, the truth snapped into focus. He wasn't protecting us. He was protecting himself. From me. Without knowing that I was the one who didn't need his money. Without knowing the risk wasn't mine. Without knowing he had just handed me the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth he'd never bothered to ask about. When Derek said, "My lawyer is already drafting it," something cold settled in my stomach. He'd made this decision days, maybe weeks, before asking me. This wasn't a conversation. It was a presentation. "I'll have my lawyer review it too," I told him lightly. That sentence snapped him out of his smug comfort. "You have a lawyer?" I smiled. Everyone should. He didn't know my attorney handled licensing contracts worth 7 figures. Derek relaxed, pretending to understand. "Sure, yeah. Makes sense." But it was too late. I already knew what I had to do. When the rain started that night, as we left the restaurant, Derek kissed my cheek. Barely, claiming he had an early meeting the next morning. I watched him drive away in his BMW, the taillights fading into the wet Denver night, and something inside me hardened into purpose. He thought he was being strategic. He thought he was in control. He thought I had everything to lose. But the storm he had invited into our relationship was only just beginning. And he had no idea what was coming. I sat in my Subaru for almost 20 minutes after leaving Verona's, rain streaking the windshield in long, shimmering lines. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles ached. Derek's words kept replaying in my head like a stuck recording I couldn't shut off. "I'm not gambling my future on you. Protecting what I've built. My lawyer already started drafting it. Not our future. Not what we've built together. Just his. And his fear of losing it." Finally, I took a breath, swallowed the sting in my throat, and reached for my phone. Eleanor Houghton answered on the second ring, her voice crisp even this late. "Tell me he finally did it." I laughed quietly, humorless, shaky. "Yeah. He wants a prenup. A sharp exhale. A dry, knowing sound. Of course he does. He said he won't gamble his future on me. My voice surprised me. It wasn't sad. It was flat. Hollow. Oh, Sloane. Eleanor's tone shifted. Something darker, threading through it. You realize this is perfect, right? Perfect. You now get to show this man exactly who's been underestimating for 3 years. I lean my head back against the seat. He has no idea. Good, she said. Let's keep it that way, until we don't. We talked for nearly half an hour while the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a warning. Eleanor was methodical, sharp and merciless in the way only an attorney who'd seen too much could be. We'll draft a counter-proposal, she said, one that gives him everything he thinks he wants. Separate property stays separate, no spousal support, basic asset protection. And I asked, breath held. And Eleanor said slowly, savoring the moment, we add one very reasonable clause. Full financial disclosure from both parties. Tax returns, account statements, investment summaries, property deeds. The whole truth on the table. A cold, clean clarity washed through me. He'll agree, I murmured. Oh, he'll leap at it, she corrected. Because he thinks disclosure protects him. He thinks he's the one with something to lose. We hung up only when the rain had turned into a full downpour, the kind that makes the whole city smell like wet concrete and pine. As I drove home, visibility blurry with water and headlights, my mind finally steadied. Derek had just set in motion something he could never undo. 3 days later, while I was working from home on a relatively mindless consulting task, cleaning up a data set for a marketing company, I saw the email notification pop up on my screen. Prenup draft review at your convenience. From Richard Brennan, Derek's attorney. The casualness of the subject line made my jaw tighten. I saved the PDF, made tea, sat cross-legged on my couch in my quiet Denver apartment, and opened it. 17 pages, dense legal language, cold, detached, prepared with the confidence of a man who assumed the woman he was marrying had little to shield. By page 3, my teeth were clenched. By page 7, I had to put down my tea to steady my shaking hands. By page 17, I understood something painful and irrevocable. Derek didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a potential liability. Clause 4 was the first slap in the face. In the event of divorce, any jointly purchased property defaults to Derek Langford's sole ownership unless Sloane Barrett can provide documented proof of contributing more than 60% of the purchase price. 60%. Not equal. Not fair. It was written in a way that assumed I was incapable of being the primary contributor to anything we'd buy. Clause 7. Sloane Barrett waives all rights to alimony or financial support regardless of marriage length or circumstances. Regardless of circumstances. Even if he cheated. Even if he left me. Even if we were married for decades. Clause 9. The engagement ring, appraised at $7,900, remains the sole property of Derek Langford and must be returned within 30 days of separation. I stared that line. The ring he gave me, supposedly representing love and commitment, was legally categorized as a temporary possession. A loan. A placeholder he could repossess if I disappointed him. The rest of the document only confirmed what those clauses screamed. This wasn't a prenup. It was a cage, designed to protect Derek's ego, not his assets. I forwarded the PDF to Eleanor. 6 minutes later, my phone rang. Sloane, she said, tone icy. Your fiancé is out of his damn mind. I laughed, but it came out brittle. What now? This document isn't protection. It's control. She started reading aloud portions of it, each one sounding more absurd through her outraged voice. Good God, he really thinks you're trying to take him for everything he has. He sees a threat where there is none, I murmured. Or at least not the one he thinks. Eleanor inhaled deeply. All right, let's proceed. What's next? We finish our counterproposal, and then her voice sharpened. We let the truth do what it always does, burn. The days that followed were surreal, like living inside two parallel universes. In one universe, everything was normal. Derek texted me good morning, sent me honeymoon resort options in Greece, called during lunch to brag about a potential new client, talked about wedding colors, asked if we should consider getting a golden retriever after the wedding. He planned our life like the prenup was a minor formality. In the other universe, the real one, I was preparing for war. Eleanor emailed the completed counterproposal Friday afternoon. It was a brilliantly crafted trap disguised as fairness. And tucked inside Section 8, subsection C was the clause. Both parties agree to full verified financial disclosure. His lawyer would skim it. Derek wouldn't read it. And then he would learn the truth he'd never cared to inquire about. That weekend, I spent time with Derek like nothing was happening. We had dinner at his sleek downtown loft, where he made a mediocre attempt at carbonara while kissing my neck. I pretended to enjoy it. We attended a dinner with his business contacts at an upscale steakhouse. Derek held court, performing success with his usual bravado, talking too loudly about deals that weren't finalized, exaggerating timelines, promising expansions he couldn't afford. I watched him and saw it all clearly for the first time. His confidence wasn't real. It was crafted, a performance he needed everyone to believe. At one point, his quiet business partner, Miles, leaned toward me and murmured, "I didn't know we're opening a Denver Tech Center office next year." I didn't know either, because it wasn't true. Derek's illusions were becoming harder to sustain. Yet, he still never asked about my life, my work, my finances, my goals. I had become a prop in his story, the supportive, modest girlfriend who wouldn't disrupt his fragile illusion. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was exhausted from pretending. As I sipped coffee on my apartment balcony, watching the city wake up below me, joggers, dog walkers, cyclists weaving through the early morning, my phone rang. Maya, my sister. "So," she said brightly, "prenup drama?" I sighed. "How did you guess?" "You always pause before answering when something's terrible." So I told her. Everything. The clauses, the lawyer, the 60% requirement, the ring, the implied distrust. Maya was silent for a full 10 seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp. "He's treating you like you're after his money. Sloan, you could buy his entire business outright." "I know. Did you tell him who you really are?" "No," I said softly, "but he's about to find out." Maya exhaled slowly. "This is going to change everything." "It already has," I whispered. She was right. I knew in my bones that what awaited us at the signing wasn't just a business meeting. It was the unraveling of the illusion we'd both been living in. The night before the signing, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. Our first date at a coffee shop near Union Station. The mountain trip where he held my hand when I fell skiing. The night he proposed during a sunset at Garden of the Gods. I used to think all of it was real. Now I didn't know if any of it had been. Maybe it had all been a performance, his and mine. He performed success. I performed simplicity. We were partners only in pretense. When I finally drifted off, it was hours before dawn. And when my alarm went off, I felt strangely calm, as if my heart already knew what would happen at 2 p.m. in that conference room. Derek's entire world was about to collide with mine, and only one of us would walk out intact. At 1:50 p.m. on Tuesday, I walked into the lobby of Brennan and Associates, the downtown Denver law firm where the prenup signing would take place. The building was one of those towering, sleek high-rises with reflective windows that mirrored the sky, making you feel small before you even stepped through the doors. Inside, the marble floors echoed with every step, and the air smelled like polished stone and expensive cologne. I checked in at the security desk, clipped the visitor badge onto my blazer, and rode the elevator to the 15th floor. My reflection in the elevator doors was exactly the version of me Derek understood. Simple navy dress, understated jewelry, hair in a modest twist. Professional but unremarkable. A woman who wouldn't make waves. A woman he assumed couldn't. When the elevator dinged, the hallway stretched long and silent with glass offices on either side. A receptionist directed me to conference room B. Derek was already inside, standing when I entered. His face lit up as if he were genuinely happy to see me. He crossed the room, brushed a kiss against my cheek. "You look beautiful," he murmured. I smiled politely. My stomach didn't flip the way it once did. Something in me had already detached. "Ready?" he asked. "More than you know." He laughed, oblivious, and guided me to a chair beside him. The long table gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. Through the enormous windows, the city sprawled below us, gray clouds gathering, hinting at rain. A fitting backdrop for what was coming. A moment later, Richard Brennan entered. He was in his late 50s, silver hair neatly combed, suit crisp and clearly expensive. His handshake was firm, polished, rehearsed. "Miss Barrett," he said warmly. "Pleasure to meet you. Derek's spoken highly of you." I returned the polite smile. "I'm sure he has." Richard settled into the seat across from us and began laying out documents with a practiced efficiency. Derek's posture straightened with an air of self-importance, like a man confident in the solidity of his position. Then the door opened again. Eleanor Houghton entered. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble, punctuating the silence like a countdown. She wore a charcoal pantsuit, hair pulled into a sleek bun, lips bold red, professional intimidation in human form. Richard stood to greet her, the cordial smile slipping just an inch. "Miss Houghton, welcome. Shall we?" Eleanor replied, cool and controlled. We all sat. Derek angled his chair closer to mine, projecting an image of unity. He thought this was a formality, a small hurdle before wedding planning resumed. Richard began. "Let's start with Derek's financial disclosures." He opened a thin folder, sliding documents across the table. Derek leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, like a king surveying his kingdom. Langford and company valuation, $325,000. His tone was proud, even though Eleanor and I both knew that figure was inflated. Primary residence, downtown loft purchased for $560,000. Remaining mortgage balance, $430,000. He glanced at me to gauge my reaction, puffing himself up slightly. Vehicle lease, BMW X4, $690 per month. Investment accounts, $84,000 in mutual funds. Mostly inherited, but he didn't mention that. As each document slid across the table, Derek's confidence expanded, filling the room like hot air. He fully believed these numbers impressed me. He believed this prenup positioned him as the financially responsible partner, the one with something to protect. My heart rate didn't change. I'd known these numbers for years, even the parts he tried to embellish. Finally, after presenting his disclosures, Richard placed the original prenup in front of us, 17 pages thick, weighted with condescension and control. "Standard protections," Richard said smoothly. "Separate property. No alimony. Clear lines. Very straightforward." Derek nodded with a satisfied smile. Straightforward. He thought the hard part was already over. He thought I would sign. Eleanor didn't even glance at the document. Instead, she opened her portfolio, removed a significantly thicker file, and placed it on the table with a soft thud. "We've prepared a counterproposal." Richard's eyebrows lifted, curious but unbothered. "Minor adjustments," Eleanor said evenly. "Everything Derek requested remains intact. We simply included one additional clause." Richard scanned the first page. His forehead creased. Then he flipped to the second. Then the third. Confusion. Surprise. Concern. Derek shifted beside me. "What clause?" he asked, voice tightening. Eleanor didn't look at him when she answered. "Full financial disclosure from both parties. Tax returns, bank statements, investment portfolios, real estate holdings. Transparency on both sides." Derek blinked. "We already gave you my disclosures." "We appreciate that," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Now it's Sloane's turn." The room went still. Richard cleared his throat. "We didn't receive any documents from Miss Barrett." Eleanor slid the thick folder toward him. "You have them now." The folder landed with a solid weight that made Derek jump slightly. Richard opened it. I watched the transformation on his face. It moved in slow motion, like a building collapsing one floor at a time. Neutrality, confusion, shock, alarm. His eyes re-scanned the numbers, like he didn't trust his own vision. He tested the documents with his fingers as though checking they were real. He flipped faster, faster, breath catching when he hit the summaries. "What is this?" he whispered. Derek leaned forward, impatient. "What's going on? Let me see." But Richard was still lost in my disclosures. "Sloane Barrett," Eleanor said calmly, "is the sole developer and owner of Cincture Systems, a cloud-based software licensed by major hotel and retail chains across North America." Derek's head snapped toward me so fast his neck cracked. Eleanor continued mercilessly. "Cincture provides her an average monthly income of $51,000. "Stop." Derek's voice wavered. "She also owns 7 rental properties across multiple states, generating approximately $17,000 in monthly income." "Eleanor, her investment portfolio totals $3.1 million. "Stop." "And she holds commercial real estate assets valued at—" I said stop. Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a violent screech. He looked pale, disoriented, eyes wide like someone had just punched all the air out of him. "Sloane, what is this?" he whispered. I held his gaze calmly. "This is my financial disclosure. Exactly what you asked for." Time seemed to slow in that sterile conference room. Richard stared at the folder like it was radioactive. Derek stared at me like I was a stranger. Eleanor sat composed, hands folded, waiting for the inevitable. You let me sit here," Derek said, voice cracking. "You let me think," he shook his head, lost. You're worth more than me." I didn't flinch. "I never hid anything. You never asked." His face twisted, betrayal, humiliation, disbelief, all battling for dominance. "You made me think I had more to lose." His voice was breaking apart. "You, Sloane, I asked for a prenup to protect myself from you." "And now you're protected," I replied softly. This isn't," he gestured wildly at the pages. "You let me brag about deals worth a fraction of what you make in a month." He sounded wounded, but not because he felt deceived. Not because he cared about me. Not because he feared losing me. He sounded wounded because his ego had been dealt a blow he didn't know how to recover from. "You made me look like a fool," he whispered, voice hollow. I shook my head. "You did that all on your own." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Even the hum of the air vent seemed to quiet. Then Derek did what I didn't expect. He broke. "I can't," he grabbed his jacket with trembling hands. "I need to. I need air. I can't be here." "Sloane," Richard started, but Derek was already storming toward the door. He yanked it open and disappeared down the hallway, the door slamming behind him so hard that the glass rattled. Richard stood awkwardly, muttered an apology, gathered Derek's papers and hurried after him. For several seconds, Eleanor and I were alone in the hollow quiet. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and smiled. "Well," she said, "that went beautifully." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I stared at the door, wondering if Derek would come back. Wondering what pieces of him were still salvageable. Wondering if this was the moment our relationship truly died. Eleanor softened. Sloane. I turned toward her, blinking slowly. My eyes burned, but no tears came. I don't know how to feel, I admitted. I thought I'd feel powerful, vindicated, but I just feel empty. That's normal, she said gently. You didn't just expose his ego. You exposed the truth of your relationship. I nodded, staring at the thick folder that held my life in numbers. He never saw me, I whispered. No, Eleanor said. He saw who he needed you to be. Until today. Thunder rumbled somewhere above the city, distant but growing. A storm was finally breaking. And so was everything Derek thought he controlled. I don't remember leaving Brennan and Associates. I don't remember the elevator ride down or walking through the echoing marble lobby or stepping into the sharp coolness of the Denver air. I only remember sitting in my car, staring straight ahead, hands trembling so badly I had to grip the steering wheel to stop them. The silence in the conference room still rang in my ears. Derek's shattered expression. The moment when realization, humiliation, and confusion all collided behind his eyes. The way he'd grabbed his jacket like he was escaping a fire. The way he hadn't looked back. Back in my apartment, the numbness settled deeper. I put my keys on the counter, sank onto the couch, and buried my face in my hands. I hadn't expected victory to feel like grief. My phone buzzed somewhere in my purse, but I didn't check it. Instead, I made myself tea I didn't drink and crawled into bed fully clothed. For hours, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, letting the day replay in excruciating detail. Derek's voice cracking, his face draining of color. The way he'd said, "You made me look small." Not "you hurt me." Not "I didn't know." Not "why didn't you trust me." Just, "how dare you threaten the image I'd built for myself." The pain of that settled into my rib cage like a bruise. The next day, there was still no word from Derek. Then another day passed, and another. The silence became its own answer. By the third day, the messages started trickling in. Texts from mutual friends. Missed calls from people who weren't even close to me. Concerned voicemails. But none from Derek. Instead, he was talking to everyone else. By the end of the week, the story had spread through our entire social circle like a shockwave. Only his version of it. And in his version, I was the villain. According to the people who contacted me with careful concern and thinly veiled judgment, Derek had told everyone. I lied to him. I manipulated him. I hid millions of dollars to test him. I ambushed him in a conference room to humiliate him. I played poor to deceive him. The narrative traveled fast because it was convenient, because it made him look powerless, because it made me look cruel. My phone buzzed constantly. Is it true you've been hiding money? Derek seems really hurt. He's devastated, Sloane. What happened? We just want to hear your side. But they didn't. They wanted confirmation for the version that already entertained them. I ignored most messages. The ones I did open were surreal in their misguided sympathy. Jessica, he said, you blindsided him. Why didn't you tell him about your business? Tom, his business partner. He's a wreck. He said you staged this to embarrass him. Is that what happened? A co-worker from Derek's firm. It would have been easier on him if you'd just been honest from the beginning. Honest. With a man who demanded a prenup because he assumed I had nothing. On the 5th day, my sister called again. Talk to me, Maya pleaded. Just tell me what's going on. He's telling people I lied. He's embarrassed, she said. He's trying to control the narrative. He's succeeding. You can't let him get away with it. Maya, I'm exhausted, I said quietly. I don't want to fight him. I don't want a war. That's the problem, she whispered. He does. 2 days later, everything shifted. I was at a local coffee shop, my little safe haven with warm lighting, soft jazz, and the best chai in Denver, when I overheard 2 women at the table beside me. Did you hear about Derek Langford? One of them asked. My spine snapped straight. The real estate guy, the other replied. Yeah, something about his fiancée? Money. I stared down at my laptop, pretending to work while my chest tightened. He's telling everyone she cheated him or lied or something, the first woman said. But guess what? My cousin works at his lawyer's office. My breath stopped. Oh God, the second woman said. What happened? The truth, the first woman replied with a laugh. Apparently he demanded a prenup because he thought he needed to protect himself from her. Then, get this, he found out she's the wealthy one. No way. Millions, she said, with an S. He totally lost it. So he's mad because his fiancée is rich? Basically, his ego couldn't handle it. They both laughed again, loud and unfiltered. For the first time in days, something inside me loosened. Not because they were laughing at Derek, but because the truth was escaping. No matter how loudly he shouted his version, the reality underneath it was louder. It had weight. It had substance. It had evidence. And people were beginning to connect the dots. That afternoon, Eleanor texted me. Brennan reached out. I blinked. Richard Brennan? Derek's attorney? I called Eleanor immediately. What happened? He apologized, Eleanor said. I sat down slowly. What? He said he'd never seen a client misread his own situation so badly, and that he advised Derek to accept the breakup with dignity. I pressed my fingers to my temple, and Derek did not take that advice. What does he want? Validation, she said simply. He needs the world to believe he's the one wronged. But they aren't believing him anymore, I said. Some still will, she replied. Some will choose the more dramatic story. But eventually, the truth wins out. After hanging up, I sat on my balcony that night, legs curled beneath me, watching the city lights shimmer. I sipped wine and felt nothing at first. Then, slowly, something warm and soft replaced the ache. Relief. It wasn't victory. It wasn't vindication. It was simply the feeling of a heavy weight lifting. One I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since the prenup conversation at Verona's. But the peace didn't last long. A week later, my phone rang. Derek's mother. I nearly let it go to voicemail. But curiosity, morbid, unhelpful curiosity won. Sloan, Margaret's voice, snapped the moment I answered. No greeting. No pause. We need to talk about what you've done to my son. A headache bloomed behind my eyes. I sat down. Margaret. He is devastated, she continued. He's embarrassed. He can barely function. And frankly, you owe him an apology. A laugh burst from my throat before I could stop it. An incredulous, bitter sound. An apology? I repeated. You lied to him for years. I didn't lie. He never asked. You let him believe you were modest. I am modest, I said, just not in the way he assumed. You should have been honest. He demanded a prenup because he assumed he had more to protect, I said sharply. He created that narrative, not me. Margaret inhaled slowly, a sanctimonious, theatrical breath I'd heard many times over Sunday brunch. All he wants, she said, is for you to sign the NDA. If you sign it, he's willing to try to work things out. He wants to move past this. The words slammed into me. An NDA, I repeated, about my own life. It would prevent the truth about your finances from becoming public, she said. It protects both of you. No, I said. It protects his ego. It protects his position, she snapped. And his reputation. If you love him. I'm not signing anything, I said. Least of all a gag order, so your son can pretend he's the successful one. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. I hung up, not angrily, just done, completely and finally done. For the rest of the evening, I walked around my apartment touching things, my books, my plants, the pillow Derek used, the mug I always reached for. Not grieving him exactly. Grieving the version of him I'd once believed in. The man I loved had never existed. Just the man he wanted the world to see. And now I saw him clearly for the first time. A few days later, I received an unexpected email from Richard Brennan. Subject: professional apology. I opened it. Miss Barrett, I wanted to formally apologize for my role in the unfortunate events at our meeting last week. In my 23 years of practice, I've never seen a client so fundamentally misunderstand his own position. For what it's worth, I've advised Derek that his accusations toward you are unsustainable and that he should accept the end of the engagement with dignity. He did not take this advice well. Wishing you the best. Respectfully, Richard Brennan. I read it twice, then a third time, then sent it to Eleanor, who replied, "This is his polite way of saying you dodged a bullet." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because Derek was failing, not because people were seeing through him, but because everything was finally breaking open, because I had survived the worst part, because the truth was untangling itself, and because, for the first time in a long time, my life was entirely my own again. The night after receiving Richard Brennan's apology, I sat on my balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and a glass of wine on the little metal table beside me. Denver's evening air was crisp, carrying the kind of quiet that settles in right before snowfall. The city lights flickered like 1,000 tiny signals from faraway lives. I found myself breathing easier than I had in weeks. Derek's smear campaign was crumbling. People were asking questions he couldn't answer. Rumors were shifting. Truth was leaking out through the cracks. But peace was different from closure. Peace is the stillness after a storm. Closure is choosing not to rebuild what the storm destroyed. I didn't realize which one I needed until the following week. It started with a phone call. "Tell me you're alive," Maya said when I picked up. "I'm alive," I said, staring at the tile backsplash while the kettle whistled behind me. And what?" I asked. "Have you slept? Eaten? Talked to anyone? Done anything besides work and brood in your apartment like a Victorian widow?" I set the kettle aside. "I'm functioning." "That's not an answer." "I'm managing." Maya let out a breath. "Then you need to get out. Saturday. Community Center on 8th. I already signed you up to volunteer." I groaned. "Maya." "Nope," she said. "You can argue, but I'm picking you up at 9. And she did. The community fundraiser was chaos in the best way. Kids running around with paper crafts. Parents juggling coffee and pastries. Volunteers sorting boxes of donated books, supplies, winter coats. The building smelled like old paper and cinnamon rolls. The kind of scent that reminded me of school book fairs and libraries. Warm and nostalgic. Maya dragged me toward a table stacked with boxes labeled ages 8 to 12 and teens. "This is your station," she announced. "I'm doing coat sorting. Don't sneak out." I rolled my eyes but smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd felt in a while. Someone else stepped up beside the table at that moment. A man carrying a box of books in his arms. He wore a t-shirt that said, "History teachers do it with dates," and a pair of beat-up sneakers that had clearly seen better years. He set the box down, looked at me with a crooked grin and said, "Please tell me you can alphabetize, because my 7th graders regularly hide graphic novels inside the biographies, and honestly, I don't trust myself around Dewey Decimal." I laughed, actually laughed, a light, surprise sound that felt like oxygen rushing back into my ribs. "Alphabetizing is one of my few superpowers," I said. "Excellent," he said, extending his hand. "Daniel Torres, middle school history teacher, professional chaos wrangler." "Sloan," I replied. "Sloan," he repeated, letting the name settle in the air. "Nice to meet you." We spent the next 2 hours sorting books by age and subject, making small talk that felt unforced and unexpectedly comfortable. Daniel told me about his students, how they would rather eat chalk than read quietly, how they'd staged a mock Boston Tea Party by tossing cafeteria fruit cups into a sink, how one kid labeled all his textbooks "Return to Sender." In return, I told him little bits about my consulting work. Only the surface-level details. Tech stuff. Nothing intense. He didn't pry. At one point, he picked up a copy of Johnny Tremaine, held it up dramatically and said, "Did you know this book makes teenagers sigh like they've been personally wronged?" I laughed again. It was the easiest conversation I'd had in months. When the event wrapped, Daniel helped me collect stray books, then leaned against the table with that same crooked grin. "I'm supposed to ask for your number now," he said. "But I want to be clear. It's strictly for sending you recommendations for bad 80s movies." "Just 80s?" I asked. "Oh no," he said. "The worse, the better." I handed him my number. 3 days later, we had coffee. 5 days after that, dinner. Then a movie, an intentionally terrible 80s action flick with questionable special effects. We laughed through all of it, and slowly, something inside me softened. About 6 weeks after the Prenup disaster, I found myself sitting on Daniel's tiny apartment balcony surrounded by string lights and mismatched chairs, eating pizza from a local spot and drinking cheap wine from mason jars. It was our 4th date, the kind where you can feel the quiet shift into something deeper. Daniel was sitting cross-legged on a chair, telling me about one of his students who'd insisted that Benjamin Franklin invented croissants. I was laughing, head thrown back, when he leaned back, studied me for a long moment, and said, "You're different today." "Different how?" "Lighter." I blinked, surprised. "I didn't know you could tell." "I can," he said simply. "You don't look like you're bracing for impact." The words hit me harder than I expected. Bracing. That's exactly what I'd been doing. For months. Years, maybe. Always waiting for the moment someone realized I was too much. Too successful. Too independent. Too intimidating. I swallowed. "There's something I should tell you." Daniel sat forward. "Okay." And then, on that small balcony under the dim glow of string lights, I told him everything. About cincture systems, the royalties, the rental properties, the investments, the commercial buildings, the prenup, the conference room blow-up, the smear campaign, the NDA, the man I almost married, the identity I'd hidden for years. My voice shook at points. Daniel didn't interrupt once. When I finished, I waited. Waited for the shift, the calculation, the widening eyes, the unspoken math, the change in tone, the hint of intimidation or envy, the sudden insecurity, the same reaction I'd seen in Derek, but quieter, more insidious. Instead, Daniel blinked, took a slow sip of his wine and said, "So you're smart and rich?" Geez, I really hit the jackpot. I stared at him. He grinned. "And before you freak out, no, I'm not intimidated. I teach teenagers about the American Revolution for $52,000 a year. I drive a Honda Civic with an AC that only works when the moon is in the right phase. I am in no position to judge anyone's life choices." A laugh burst out of me, loud, relieved, real. He squeezed my hand across the table, eyes warm. "Sloan, your success doesn't scare me," he said. "It inspires me." That was the moment I felt something inside me repair itself. Something I hadn't realized was fractured. He didn't need me to be smaller. He didn't need to be reassured. He didn't feel threatened. He didn't see my success as a shadow over his life. He saw it as something extraordinary. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, deeply seen. The months that followed were quiet in the best way. I still worked, still traveled for property checks, still expanded cinctures features, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I let myself be known. Fully. Completely. 6 months after our first date, Daniel proposed. Not with an elaborate speech or a dramatic backdrop. Not with a ring that cost more than his car. Just a simple question on a Sunday morning over pancakes. Want to build a life together? And that, simple, honest, without ego or fear, was everything I had ever wanted. I said yes. I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Because Daniel wasn't afraid of who I was. He was proud of it. And so was I. The morning after Daniel proposed, I woke up to the soft Denver sunlight pouring through his thin curtains, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, and the sudden realization that, for the first time in years, my future felt like something I wanted, not something I was performing. Daniel stood at the stove barefoot, hair messy, humming off-key to a song that wasn't even playing. When he turned and saw me standing in the doorway, his face lit up like I was the best part of his morning. It was almost disorienting. Affection that simple, that uncalculated, that genuine. "Morning, fiancé," he said, mischief in his voice. I smiled, really smiled. "Morning." He handed me a mug of coffee and kissed my forehead. No theatrics, no performance, no expectation, just closeness. I had forgotten what ease felt like. We decided to keep the engagement quiet for a little while. Just between us, Maya, and a select handful of people who actually mattered. After everything that had happened with Derek, I wasn't ready for opinions, whispers, or speculation. But secrets don't stay small forever, especially when someone unexpected is about to drag you back into the spotlight. It started 3 weeks later, on a warm Saturday morning, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I should have gone with that instinct. "Hello." A shaky breath on the other end. "Sloan." My chest tightened. "Derek." His voice was thinner, broken at the edges. I don't know where to start." "Then don't," I said quietly. I need to talk to you," he pleaded. "It's important." "Derek, whatever this is. Please." His voice cracked. "Just meet me. One time." Against my better judgment, and with an unease that sat wrong in my stomach, I agreed to a neutral, very public cafe downtown. If nothing else, I needed the closure he never gave me. He looked like a ghost when I arrived. Gone was the polished, curated appearance. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles bruising the skin beneath his eyes. When he saw me, he exhaled shakily, like he'd been holding his breath for months. "Sloan, thank you for coming." I sat. He sat. Silence stretched. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't speak. "I lost everything," he said softly. "The business, it's gone." My eyes flickered up. "Gone." He nodded. Deals fell through. Clients backed out. Miles left. Investors didn't like the rumors. There it was. Consequences he thought he'd outrun. He swallowed. "I thought you ruined me. I told myself you had. I convinced myself you did it on purpose. But I know now. I did it to myself." A long pause. "I treated you like a threat," he continued. "Like you were something to control, not someone to trust. I judged you, assumed things about you. And you never threw anything back at me. You never bragged. You never rubbed your success in my face. That's because my goal was never to make you feel small." He winced. "I know. And that's what makes this so much worse." He rubbed his face with both hands, voice trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I regret it. All of it. The prenup, the lies, the way I twisted the story. I was drowning in shame, and I punished you for it." His voice cracked on the last word. I sat there, listening, feeling the strange mix of pity and distance settling between us. He wasn't asking for another chance. He wasn't trying to manipulate. He was a man finally facing the person he had been and losing. But his apology didn't change the truth. He wasn't my future. "You hurt me," I said softly. "I know. You didn't see me. I know. You loved the version of me that stayed small." He flinched. "I didn't know how to love the real you. And that," I said gently, "is why we could never have made it." He nodded, tears forming but not falling. "I hope," he whispered, "you find someone who sees all of you." I already did. His breath hitched, a tiny break in the facade. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'm glad," he said. "Truly." We sat in silence for a few moments. Not angry, Not emotional. Just final. When I stood, he stood too. Goodbye, Derek. He swallowed hard. Goodbye, Sloane. And that was it. No dramatic scene. No lingering attachment. No unresolved tension. Just closure. Finally, on my walk home, I felt lighter. Not because Derek was gone, but because the last lingering pieces of who I had been with him had finally fallen away. I wasn't bracing anymore. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was choosing. And that changed everything. 2 months later, on a breezy spring morning, I stood in a small, sunlit venue on the outskirts of Denver, next to Daniel, watching our families and closest friends take their seats. No grand ballroom. No pretentious speeches. No towering floral arrangements or curated photo backdrops. Just us. Small. Heartfelt. Warm. The ceremony was simple. Maya officiated. Daniel cried before I did. Everyone laughed when he messed up my middle name. We exchanged vows under a canopy of string lights and eucalyptus branches. When he said, "I don't love a version of you. I love all of you," I felt myself exhale in a way I never had before. When I said, "You don't need to be powerful for me to feel safe with you," he wiped a tear and squeezed my hands. We kissed. Everyone clapped. It was imperfect in every perfect way. After the ceremony, Daniel's students, yes, his students, sent a giant handmade card decorated with doodles and chaotic messages like, "Congrats, Mr. T. Don't forget Monday's test. Your wife seems cool. Can she fix the AC in your car? We love you, Mr. T, even though your tests are evil." It was ridiculous and perfect. Later, during the reception, Daniel turned to me on the dance floor, his hands warm against my waist. "You know," he said, "I don't care how much money you have." "I know." "What I care about," he said softly, leaning his forehead against mine, "is the way you look when you're finally free." I felt my throat tighten. "And how do I look?" I whispered, like a woman who stopped apologizing for being extraordinary. The song changed. The lights glowed. The room blurred. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen, fully, completely, beautifully. Not for what I had, but for who I was. 3 weeks later, when we returned from a quiet honeymoon in Oregon, I received a single envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of stationery. Derek's handwriting. Just 5 words. "I'm glad it wasn't me." I stared at it, stunned. Because somehow, those 5 words didn't hurt. They healed. He understood. Finally. Not in anger or heartbreak or ego, but in acceptance. And that was all I needed to close that chapter for good. I tossed the letter into my drawer, not out of sentiment, but out of peace. Because my story with Derek had ended exactly where it should have. And my story with Daniel was just beginning. Married life with Daniel didn't feel like some dramatic, new chapter. It felt like an exhale. A long, overdue release of tension I didn't know my body had been holding for years. The first morning we woke up as husband and wife. His arms slung heavy across my waist, sunlight spilling across the sheets. I realized something. Safety doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breathing. He made pancakes, burned the first batch, pretended it was intentional crisping, and then tried again. I laughed so hard I nearly snorted. He grinned like making me laugh was a personal accomplishment. This, I thought, is marriage. Not fear. Not performance. Not shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. Just partnership. We didn't rush into changing our lives overnight. We stayed in my apartment, yes, the same modest Denver place with a crappy parking lot and slightly haunted sounding pipes, because Daniel said it felt like us. He insisted we take our time deciding what came next. "I've never cared where we live," he told me one night while assembling IKEA furniture like it was a survival challenge. "I care who I'm coming home to." And somehow, that mattered more than any dream house could. We settled into routines that felt natural. Morning coffee together. Evening walks around the block. Friday nights with terrible movies. Sundays grading papers side by side. Him with essays, me with software updates. Simple. Steady. Home. 3 months after the wedding, something shifted. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, careful, grown-up way. Daniel came home from work one afternoon looking thoughtful, like a man wrestling with a decision he wanted to get right. After he'd changed out of his tie and sat beside me on the couch, he hesitated before speaking. "Can I ask you something?" I turned toward him, sensing the weight behind the question. "Anything." "You've never pressured me about money," he began slowly, "but I don't ever want to feel like I'm letting you carry everything alone. I know what you make, what you own, what you've built, and sometimes it scares me that I can't match it." I reached for his hand. "You're not supposed to match it." "I know," he said quietly, "but I want to contribute. I want to feel like you're equal, not financially, as a partner." He was giving words to something Derek never could have articulated, because Derek never had the courage to admit vulnerability. Daniel continued, "So I've been thinking maybe I want to get my master's. I want to teach AP level, maybe eventually move into curriculum design or admin. But I didn't want you to think I'm only doing it because of you." I felt my chest pull tight. "Daniel," I said softly, "I love you for who you already are. Your students adore you. The world needs teachers with your heart. If you want this degree, I want it because you want it, not because you think it'll make you worthy." He exhaled like he'd been holding that uncertainty for months. "Then, will you help me?" he whispered. "Not financially. Just be in my corner while I try for something bigger." I smiled. "I've been in your corner from day one." He rested his forehead against mine. "Good. Because I've never wanted to grow with anyone the way I want to grow with you." That moment, quiet, earnest, unpolished, felt bigger than any proposal. He wasn't asking me to shrink. He wasn't asking me to hide. He wasn't asking me to sign away my identity. He was asking me to stand beside him. And that, I realize, is what partnership looks like. Over the next months, life became a beautiful blend of ordinary and extraordinary. Daniel applied for grad school. I expanded CloudSync Pro in ways that would have terrified me years ago. Maya became the kind of aunt who buys kids books, not toys, because literacy matters Sloan. And then, slowly but steadily, the past began fading into something that no longer defined me, until it resurfaced in a way I absolutely didn't see coming. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at a local Denver business symposium, one of those events where entrepreneurs talk about scaling in the tech industry. I was a panelist, something I'd avoided for years, but now felt ready to embrace. After my talk, people came up to ask questions, shake hands, network. I was mid-conversation when I spotted him, Derek, standing across the room. I froze. He looked different, truly different this time. Not just worn down like before, not panicked or humiliated. Calmer, more grounded, almost humbled. He saw me at the same moment, and for a brief second, I expected him to turn away. But he didn't. Instead, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement and then, respectfully, stayed where he was, making no attempt to approach. It was the first time since the chaos that Derek allowed me the dignity of choosing the terms. I excused myself, walked toward him, not out of emotion, but out of closure. "Hi, Derek." He smiled just barely. "Sloan, you did great up there." "Thank you." A beat passed. "You look well," I offered. He nodded. "I'm getting there. Slowly. Doing the work I should have done years ago." Then he hesitated. "I heard you got married." I nodded. "I'm happy for you," he said sincerely. "Really." I believed him. For the first time ever, I believed him. He glanced around the room. "I don't want to take up your time. I just wanted you to know I've gotten the chance to see things more clearly. About myself. About us. About what went wrong." I didn't respond. He continued. "You were never the threat. My ego was. And you deserved someone who wasn't afraid of who you are." A lump formed in my throat, but not from grief. from release. Thank you, I said quietly. He nodded once more and gently stepped aside, letting me pass. No drama. No lingering looks. No bitterness. Just two people crossing paths for the last time, in peace. That evening, I got home before Daniel. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch staring at the quiet apartment. Derek showing up didn't shake me. It didn't rattle my heart. It didn't reopen wounds. It simply reminded me how far I'd come. When Daniel walked in a few minutes later, hair tousled from the wind, sleeves rolled up, tie in his pocket, the entire room shifted. Warm. Familiar. Home. I stood. Hi, I said, softer than usual. He kissed me lightly, then pulled back, looking concerned. Everything okay? I nodded. Something happened today, I began. I saw Derek. His eyebrows shot up. Oh. Yeah. It wasn't dramatic. He apologized again. And then he left. Daniel watched me carefully. How do you feel? I thought about it. Grateful, I said finally. Not for him. For us. For you. He smiled, that slow, gentle smile that always unraveled me. You know, he murmured, pulling me into his arms. I don't care if your past shows up sometimes. I only care if you come home to me. I always will. And I meant it. Because love isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing someone despite it. It's choosing growth over ego. It's choosing truth over performance. It's choosing partnership over power. And Daniel was all of those things. He was the choice I would make every single time. Without hesitation. Without regret. Without looking back. A month later, Daniel was accepted into his graduate program. We celebrated with cheap champagne and burnt brownies. He insisted on baking himself. He told his students he'd be Professor Torres someday, and they groaned dramatically. Life was finally moving forward. Not because I'd survived heartbreak, but because I'd chosen healing. And this time, I wasn't doing it alone. Life, it turned out, doesn't explode into a perfect ending. It settles. It softens. It rearranges itself quietly around the pieces that once felt shattered and somehow forms a shape that fits you better than anything that came before. 6 months into Daniel's graduate program, our lives looked nothing like the polished, carefully curated future Derek once envisioned for us. Our version of success was different. Saturday mornings meant grocery shopping in sweatpants and Daniel reading historical facts off cereal boxes like they were academic journals. Weeknights meant him grading essays while I reviewed Cloud Sync development notes. Sunday evenings were reserved for our ritual. Cheap ice cream, a couch blanket, and a marathon of whatever terrible movie franchise we were committed to suffering through that month. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram perfect. But it was ours. A year after the wedding, we finally decided it was time to move. Not to the luxury downtown condo Derek once bragged about wanting, but to a quiet, 3-bedroom house in the Denver Highlands with creaky floors and a backyard large enough for a garden Daniel swore he'd keep alive. We moved in on a warm spring morning. By noon, the kitchen was full of unpacked boxes and takeout containers, and Daniel was standing on a chair trying, and failing, to install a light fixture. "Hand me that screwdriver. The one that looks like it belongs in a museum," he said. "You mean the Phillips head?" He pointed dramatically. "That one." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. After hours of unpacking, we collapsed onto the living room floor with pizza and wine straight from the bottle. The room wasn't finished, no curtains, half the furniture missing. Walls still blank, but it felt like the most complete space I'd ever lived in. Daniel nudged me gently. "You happy?" I looked around the imperfect room, the imperfect house, the imperfect but beautiful life we were building. "More than happy," I said. "Whole." The next few months were the kind of peaceful I didn't know people could have. Daniel thrived in his program, his professors praising his insight and his students still emailing him for advice, even after he transitioned from full-time teaching to part-time while studying. Cloud Sync Pro entered its next growth phase, I hired a small internal team, something I'd never allowed myself to do before. Letting go of control was strangely liberating. Maya started dating someone new, a paramedic with kind eyes and the patience of a saint. Watching her glow again filled me with a quiet joy. Life remained busy, full and steady. But the moment I really knew that my past with Derek no longer had any power over me came unexpectedly. It was a rainy Wednesday when I got the email. Subject line: Cloud Sync Pro, National Feature Request. I skimmed the message twice, blinking slowly as it sank in. A major national hotel chain, one with properties in nearly every major U.S. city, wanted to pilot Cloud Sync Pro's newest update. A deal worth 7 figures annually. A deal that could propel the software from successful to industry standard. I stared at the email in disbelief. Then I called the one person who'd been there since the beginning. Maya answered on the first ring. Sloan? Are you okay? Are you crying? Should I grab ice cream or a baseball bat? Neither, I said, laughing through a sob. I just got the biggest deal of my entire career. There was a beat of silence, then a scream, so loud I had to pull the phone away. She cried. I cried. And when I hung up, hands shaking, I walked downstairs where Daniel was folding laundry with dramatic annoyance at a fitted sheet. He looked up immediately. What happened? You look like someone told you our house is haunted, and honestly, based on that crawl space. I held up my phone. They chose me, I whispered. The national chain. They chose Cloud Sync Pro. Daniel stared for exactly 1 second before tackling me in a hug so tight I squeaked. Sloan Barrett, he said into my hair, you are unstoppable. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe it. With growth came recognition. I was invited to speak at conferences. Tech publications asked to interview me. I received invitations to panels, podcasts, business retreats. For years, I hid behind the facade of a modest consultant. Now I stepped into visibility with a confidence I'd never known I had. But something surprising happened once my name became more public. People whispered about me again. Only this time, it wasn't rumors or judgment or Derek's collapsing narrative. It was respect, admiration, curiosity about how I built something so successful with no investors and no fanfare. I wasn't hiding anymore, and it felt like breathing oxygen for the first time in years. About 18 months after the Prenup implosion, I saw Derek one final time. It wasn't planned. Daniel and I were attending a charity gala hosted by his graduate program, a fundraiser for underfunded schools. I donated quietly, anonymously. Daniel had helped coordinate the setup. We arrived early, and while Daniel was distracted helping rearrange tables, I stepped into the venue hallway for a moment of quiet. That's when I saw him. Derek. He was dressed in a navy suit, hair neatly styled. He looked healthier than before, steadier, but older in a way that suggested life had finally humbled him enough to learn. He saw me instantly, and this time he didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't smirk. He simply nodded once, respectfully. Sloan. Derek. Congratulations, he said softly, on everything. There was no bitterness in his voice, no ego, no defensiveness, just sincerity. Thank you, I replied. I hope you're doing better. I am, he said. A lot better. I'm not who I used to be. I'm glad. We stood there for a moment, not as ex-fiancés, not as adversaries, but as two people who had finally closed a chapter. Derek exhaled slowly. I want you to know, I'm grateful you walked away. I blinked. You're grateful? Yes, he said quietly. Losing you forced me to confront things I'd spent years avoiding. You didn't just walk away from me. You pushed me toward growing up. The old Derek never could have said that. And yet here he was. I hope you find someone who fits you, I said. He smiled, small but genuine. I will. And I hope they're as brave as you were. He stepped aside, letting me pass. A clean ending. No threads left hanging. Just peace. When I found Daniel inside, he pulled me close and kissed my temple. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, completely." Because for the first time since everything began, I felt free. Not just from Derek. From the version of myself who thought she had to hide to be loved. From the girl who feared money would poison what she touched. I wasn't hiding anymore. And I wasn't afraid. Months later, CloudSync Pro officially became the national software provider for the hotel chain. Daniel graduated his program with honors and was offered a role designing new state curricula. We traveled. We rebuilt. We grew. Together. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, full, messy, honest, ours. And one evening, while sitting on our back porch with the sunset reflecting off the mountains, Daniel took my hand. "Sloane," he murmured, "you know what I love most about our life." "What?" "That you never made me feel small, and you never let yourself be small either." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I don't ever want to shrink again," I whispered. "You never will," he said, and I knew he meant it. Because real love doesn't demand that you hide. Real love doesn't fear your strength. Real love doesn't wilt when you rise. Real love grows with you. And I finally had it. If this story of Sloane Barrett's ultimate power move had you hooked from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Eleanor slid that thick folder across the conference table and Derek's entire ego collapsed in real time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.